You ever notice how truth doesn't scream, it waits? Quiet, patient. While lies throw parties, shake hands, get applause. You stand there, carrying something real, something heavy, and nobody believes you. Not because you're wrong, but because the truth isn't entertaining enough. It doesn't dress well. It doesn't beg. It just exists. And that drives people crazy. But somewhere, someone saw it. Every detail. Every crack in the story they tried to bury you under. They didn't laugh. They didn't look away. They watched. They listened. And now the balance starts to shift. Not loudly. Not all at once. But in that slow, unsettling way where everything fake begins to rot from the inside. Because when the truth finally finds a voice that refuses to be silenced, it doesn't ask for permission anymore. Truth doesn't need validation, and that's what makes it so uncomfortable. To everyone watching you stand there, without applause, without backup, without a crowd chanting your name. People are addicted to agreement, to nodding heads and loud approval. Like truth somehow becomes more real when it's surrounded by noise. But real truth doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't perform tricks. It doesn't twist itself into something more acceptable just to fit into fragile minds. It just sits there unshaken, even when everyone around it pretends it doesn't exist. And that's the part that unsettles them, not you. The fact that you're carrying something solid in a world built on shifting sand. They'll question you, of course. They'll look at you like you're the problem, like you're the one disrupting their comfortable illusion. Because accepting your truth means admitting they were wrong, and people would rather protect their ego than face reality. So they'll laugh, they'll doubt, they'll whisper behind your back, trying to chip away at your certainty. They think if they say it enough times, if they gather enough voices, they can bend the truth into something else. But numbers don't change reality. They just create a louder lie. And deep down, they know it. That's why they keep talking, keep pushing, keep trying to drown you out. Because silence would force them to hear the one thing they're afraid of. You don't need to defend what's real. That's the trap they want you in, scrambling, explaining, exhausting yourself trying to prove something that already exists. The more you chase validation, the more you make it seem like the truth is negotiable, like it depends on their approval. But it doesn't. It never did. Truth stands whether you argue for it or not, whether they believe it or not, whether the entire room turns its back on you. And that's where your power hides, not in convincing them, but in refusing to break just because they refuse to see. There's a strange kind of fear that spreads when someone refuses to bend. It's quiet at first, almost invisible, like a crack forming in glass. People start to feel it, even if they can't explain it. They sense that something about you isn't shifting, isn't folding under pressure like everything else they're used to. And that scares them more than any argument ever could. Because if you're right, if your truth holds without their permission, then everything they've built their beliefs on starts to look fragile. And nobody likes realizing the ground beneath them isn't as stable as they thought. So they'll keep testing you, pushing, waiting for that moment where you finally snap, finally doubt yourself, finally ask them, "Do you believe me now?" Because that's the moment they win, not by proving you wrong, but by making you need them to prove you right. And if you fall into that, even for a second, they'll feel it. They'll see it in your eyes. That tiny flicker of uncertainty, that need for approval. And they'll grab onto it, twist it, use it to reshape the narrative all over again. But when you don't give them that, when you stand there with that unsettling calm, that refusal to chase their approval, something changes. The noise starts to sound desperate. The laughter feels forced. The confidence in their voices starts to crack, because they're not used to someone who doesn't play the game. They expect reactions, emotions, defenses. They expect you to fight on their terms. And when you don't, when you simply exist in your truth, without needing them to validate it. It creates a kind of tension they can't control, can't predict, can't silence. Lies are louder, not stronger, and that's the trick almost everyone falls for. Noise feels powerful. It fills the room, drowns out doubt, makes people believe something must be true just because it refuses to stay quiet. Lies thrive on that chaos. They dress themselves up in confidence, repetition, and just enough detail to sound convincing. They don't care about being real. They care about being heard. And the louder they get, the more people start confusing volume with truth, mistaking aggression for certainty. You've seen it before. Someone speaks with just enough arrogance, just enough force, and suddenly people stop questioning. Not because they're convinced, but because it's easier to go along with the noise than to stand against it. Lies depend on that weakness, on that silent agreement that forms when no one wants to be the first to challenge what's being shouted. It becomes a performance, a carefully crafted illusion where the goal isn't to prove anything, but to overwhelm everything. And for a while it works. It always does. But strength doesn't come from how loud something is. Strength comes from what survives when the noise fades. Lies can't handle silence. Strip away the shouting, the repetition, the emotional pressure, and suddenly they start to look fragile, inconsistent, hollow. That's why they keep escalating, keep adding more layers, more voices, more drama. They're not reinforcing themselves. They're hiding their weakness behind a wall of sound. Because deep down, a lie knows it can't stand on its own. It needs distraction, confusion, anything to keep people from looking too closely. And the more you watch, the more you start to notice the cracks. The story changes slightly. Details don't line up the way they should. The confidence starts to feel forced, like it's being held together by pressure instead of truth. But most people ignore those signs. Not because they don't see them, but because acknowledging them means stepping out of the comfort of the crowd. It means risking being the one voice that doesn't match the rest, the one person who refuses to clap along. And that's a lonely place most people avoid. Lies rely on momentum. They need to keep moving, keep spreading, keep getting louder so no one has time to stop and question them. The moment that momentum slows, even a little, everything starts to unravel. Because without constant reinforcement, a lie has nothing to support it. It begins to collapse under its own contradictions, its own exaggerations, its own need to constantly prove itself. And when that happens, all that noise, all that energy, all that confidence turns into something desperate. You can feel the shift when it happens. The tone changes. What once sounded certain starts to sound defensive. What once felt powerful starts to feel forced. And the people who believed it, who repeated it, who stood behind it, begin to hesitate. Not openly, not at first, but in those small, almost invisible ways. A pause before they speak. A glance that lingers a second too long. A question they don't quite ask out loud. Because somewhere beneath all that noise, reality starts pushing back. And that's the part they can't control. No matter how loud a lie gets, it can't rewrite what's real. It can delay it, distort it, bury it under layers of distraction, but it can't erase it. Eventually, the weight of reality presses through, exposing every inconsistency, every forced detail, every moment where the lie tried too hard to hold itself together. And when that happens, the noise doesn't protect it anymore. It exposes it. Every word that once sounded powerful starts to echo differently, like something hollow pretending to be solid. Because volume was never strength. It was just a mask, a way to make something weak look untouchable, until the silence finally arrives and strips it down to what it really is. Silence hides powerful witnesses, the kind people forget about, because they're too busy watching the ones making noise. Everyone pays attention to the loud voices, the ones arguing, accusing, defending. Putting on a show like truth is some kind of performance. But the real danger, the real presence in the room, is the one that doesn't speak. The one that watches. The one that absorbs everything without interrupting, without reacting, without giving anyone the satisfaction of knowing what they're thinking. You see, silence isn't empty. It's full of details people overlook, full of patterns people ignore, full of moments that don't seem important until they're stitched together into something undeniable. While everyone else is busy talking over each other, trying to control the narrative, the silent one is collecting it. Every contradiction, every slip, every time a story changes, just enough to reveal something underneath. And nobody notices, because nobody fears what isn't making noise. That's the illusion. People assume that if someone isn't speaking, they're irrelevant. That if they're not defending, not accusing, not reacting, then they don't matter. But silence isn't weakness, it's control. It's restraint. It's knowing that words can be twisted, interrupted, dismissed. But observation, that stays untouched. It builds quietly, piece by piece, until it becomes something too solid to ignore. And the loud ones, they feed into it without even realizing. They keep talking, keep explaining, keep trying to outdo each other, thinking they're strengthening their position. But all they're really doing is leaving behind fragments, evidence, traces of something that doesn't quite add up. They reveal more than they intend, because they're focused on being heard, not on being consistent. They think volume protects them, that if they dominate the space with enough noise, no one will question what's being said. But someone is always questioning, just not out loud. There's a certain kind of patience in silence that most people don't understand. It doesn't rush. It doesn't need immediate results. It waits. The knowing that time exposes things words try to hide. And while everyone else burns energy trying to convince, trying to win, trying to control how they're perceived, the silent witness is just there, watching it all unfold, letting people reveal themselves without interference. Because the less you interrupt someone, the more they expose who they really are. And when the moment comes, when silence finally breaks, it doesn't come out uncertain or scattered. It comes out precise, focused, backed by everything that was seen but never acknowledged. That's what makes it unsettling. Not the volume, not the aggression, but the accuracy. The way it cuts through all the noise without needing to raise its voice. Because it's not guessing. It's not assuming. It knows. That's when people start to feel it. That shift. That realization that someone was there the whole time, paying attention in a way they didn't expect. And suddenly, all the noise they relied on doesn't feel so safe anymore. Because noise can be challenged, argued with, drowned out. But something built in silence, something rooted in observation, in patience and truth, it doesn't shake the same way. The room changes when that happens. The energy shifts. The loud voices lose their rhythm, their confidence slipping, just enough to be noticed. Because they weren't prepared for that kind of presence. They were ready for arguments, for reactions, for resistance they could push against. But they weren't ready for someone who didn't play along, someone who let them speak freely, unknowingly revealing everything they thought they had under control, and by the time they realize it, by the time they start to question what was seen, what was understood, what was silently gathered, it's already too late. Someone always sees everything, even when you're convinced the moment slipped through unnoticed, even when the room felt blind, distracted, too busy to catch what really happened. That's the illusion people cling to, that if enough chaos surrounds an action, it disappears, dissolves into the noise like it never existed. But reality doesn't work like that. Every move leaves a trace, every word leaves an imprint. Every choice echoes somewhere, even if it's not heard right away. And somewhere in that space, there's always a pair of eyes that didn't blink at the wrong time. People underestimate presence. They assume awareness comes with attention, with obvious focus, with someone staring directly at the scene like they're trying to memorize it. But the most dangerous kind of awareness is the one that doesn't look obvious at all. The one that blends in, that exists in the background, that doesn't demand recognition. Because when you're not noticed, you're not filtered. People don't adjust themselves around you. They don't tighten their story or polish their behavior. They just reveal. It's almost funny how comfortable people get when they think no one important is watching. Their guard drops, their words loosen. Their actions become just a little more careless. Not because they're stupid, but because they're human. Everyone relaxes when they believe they're safe from judgment, safe from consequence, safe from being seen. But that sense of safety is fragile, built on assumption rather than fact. Because being unseen and being unnoticed aren't the same thing. There's always someone who catches the small things. The hesitation before a sentence. The way a story doesn't quite match the tone it's told in. The glance that lingers too long or shifts too quickly. Details that seem meaningless on their own, but start forming a pattern when someone actually pays attention. And while others brush those moments off, dismiss them as nothing, the one who's watching stores them away, connects them, builds something out of them. The dangerous part isn't that someone saw. It's that they understood. Seeing can be dismissed, argued against, twisted into something uncertain. But understanding, that's different. That means the pieces didn't just exist. They made sense. They aligned. They formed a version of events that doesn't rely on what's being said, but on what actually happened. And that kind of clarity doesn't need confirmation, doesn't need permission, doesn't need anyone else to agree with it to remain intact. And the ones who think they got away with something, they carry this quiet confidence, this belief that the moment is behind them, buried where it can't be reached. They move forward like nothing's there, like the past has already faded into irrelevance. But they forget that time doesn't erase, it reveals. The further you go, the more those unnoticed details start to matter. The more those quiet observations begin to take shape. Because what was once just a moment becomes context, becomes evidence, becomes something that can't be ignored anymore. That's when the tension starts to creep in. Subtle at first. A feeling that something isn't as secure as it seemed. A sense that maybe, just maybe, everything wasn't as invisible as they thought. And it doesn't take much to trigger that feeling. Just a look, a question, a shift in tone. Something small that hints at awareness, at knowledge, at the possibility that the truth didn't disappear after all. Because deep down, everyone knows how fragile their version of events really is. They know it depends on no one seeing too much, no one connecting the wrong dots, no one stepping forward with clarity instead of confusion. And the moment that possibility exists, the moment it feels real, the confidence they had starts to crack just enough to let doubt in. Because someone always sees everything, not loudly, not obviously, but completely. Justice begins quietly, not with a bang, not with a dramatic reveal, but with something almost invisible, something so small most people miss it entirely. There's no announcement, no warning sign flashing in bright colors, telling everyone what's about to unfold. It starts in the background, in the unnoticed corners where patterns begin to shift, where details that once seemed meaningless start aligning in ways that feel intentional. And while everyone is still caught up in the noise, still distracted by what's loud and immediate, something deeper starts moving beneath it all. People expect justice to be loud. They imagine it as this overwhelming force that crashes into the moment and instantly corrects everything, like a sudden storm that wipes the slate clean. But real justice doesn't work like that. It's patient. It doesn't rush in to prove a point. It waits, it observes, it lets everything play out just enough for the truth to fully reveal itself. Because rushing would mean relying on assumptions, and justice doesn't deal in assumptions. It deals in certainty. That's why it feels so unsettling when it starts to take shape. Nothing obvious changes at first. Nothing you can point to and say, there it is. But there's a shift. Subtle, almost unnoticeable, like the air in the room getting heavier, without anyone knowing why. Conversations begin to feel different. The confidence in certain voices starts to waver just a little. The same words that once sounded convincing begin to carry a hint of strain, like they're being held together instead of flowing naturally. And the people who thought they were in control, the ones who believed they had everything perfectly arranged, they don't recognize it right away. They keep moving the same way, speaking the same way, acting like nothing has changed. Because from their perspective, nothing has. The illusion still looks intact. The surface still holds. But underneath, something is shifting. Something they can't see and can't stop, because they don't even know it's happening. Justice doesn't need attention to grow. It doesn't rely on being acknowledged or believed in its early stages. In fact, it thrives in being overlooked, because the less interference it faces, the more precise it becomes. Every moment adds to it, every action feeds into it, every overlooked detail strengthens it. It builds quietly, carefully, like something being constructed piece by piece in the dark where no one thinks to look. There's a certain inevitability to it, a sense that once it starts, it can't really be undone. Not because it's forceful, but because it's accurate. It's based on what actually happened, not on what people say happened. And that difference matters, because narratives can be changed, twisted, rewritten to fit whatever version people want to believe. But reality? That stays consistent, no matter how many times it's ignored or denied. And as justice continues to form, that consistency begins to press against everything false. It doesn't shout it down. It doesn't fight it directly. It just exists, solid and unchanging, creating pressure that the lies weren't built to withstand. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, things begin to give. Small cracks at first. A hesitation here, a contradiction there. Moments that don't quite hold together the way they used to. That's when the unease starts to spread. Not openly, not in a way people can easily point out, but in that quiet, internal way where something just feels off. Where confidence turns into over-explanation. Where control turns into subtle desperation. Because on some level, even if they don't fully understand it, they can feel that something is slipping. Something is moving in a direction they can't predict anymore. And the most unsettling part is that there's no clear moment to stop it. No single point where they can step in and fix everything before it becomes visible. Because by the time justice reaches that point, by the time it begins to surface in a way people can finally recognize, it's already been building for far too long to be undone, already too complete to be dismissed, already too grounded in reality to be shaken by noise or denial. Reality always exposes deception, no matter how carefully it's wrapped, no matter how convincingly it's delivered, no matter how many people choose to believe it, just to keep things comfortable. You can dress a lie in confidence, give it structure, rehearse it until it sounds flawless, but reality doesn't care about presentation. It doesn't care how convincing something feels in the moment. It just waits, quietly, patiently, letting everything unfold exactly as it is, knowing that eventually, something won't align. Deception depends on control. It needs everything to go a certain way, every detail to stay in place, every person involved to play their part without deviation. The moment something slips, even slightly, the entire structure starts to feel unstable. And the more complex the lie, the more fragile it becomes. Because now it has too many moving parts, too many details to maintain, too many chances for something to go wrong. And something always does. It's inevitable. At first, it's small, almost invisible, a detail that doesn't quite match, a reaction that feels off, a timeline that doesn't fully connect, easy to ignore, easy to dismiss, especially when everything else still seems intact. People brush it aside because they want the illusion to hold. They want things to make sense in the simplest way possible, even if that simplicity is built on something false. So they overlook the inconsistency, They accept the explanation. They move on without questioning too deeply. But reality doesn't let those details disappear. It holds on to them. It lets them sit there, unresolved, waiting for the moment when they connect with something else that doesn't fit. And when that happens, when two small inconsistencies collide, they create something bigger, a pattern. And patterns are dangerous because they're harder to ignore. One mistake can be explained away. Two can be dismissed as coincidence. But when it keeps happening, when the same kind of flaw appears over and over again, it starts to form a shape that people can't unsee. That's when the tension begins to build, quietly, beneath the surface. People start to feel it before they fully understand it. That subtle discomfort, that sense that something isn't as solid as it appeared. They might not say it out loud, might not even admit it to themselves, but it's there. And once that feeling exists, it doesn't go away. It lingers, growing stronger every time another inconsistency shows up. Every time reality pushes back, just a little harder against the version of events they've been accepting. The ones behind the deception feel it too. Maybe even before anyone else does, because they know where the weak points are. They know which parts of the story are forced, which details are stretched, which moments don't hold up under real scrutiny. And when reality starts pressing against those weak points, even slightly, it creates pressure they can't fully control. So they react. They adjust the story, add new layers, try to reinforce what's already there. But every adjustment creates more risk, more chances for something else to break. And that's how it unravels.